Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing Maggie Gyllenhaal's new film, The Bride. The film stars Jessie Buckley in a dual role as both the bride and Mary Shelley. You have Christian Bale in the film as Frankenstein or Frank. Peter Sarsgaard is in the film as a detective. You also have Annette Bening as Dr. Cornelia Euphronius, a scientist who helps bring the bride to life. You have Jake Gyllenhaal as Ronnie Reed, a popular actor. You also have Penelope Cruz as a detective as well. And the film was made on an over $80 million reported budget, which is kind of insane, but I love it. It was distributed by Warner Bros. And is coming out technically tonight for its official release date, March 6th, 2026. This is Maggie Gyllenhaal's second feature film. She also directed a short film during COVID, so she's still a pretty young up-and-coming director, even though she's obviously very well established as an actress in her own right. The film is a very loose reinterpretation of James Whale's classic 1935 film The Bride of Frankenstein, and in fact I think the Wikipedia article that states the film draws inspiration from that movie is a more accurate way of putting it. This is in no way something that's trying to remake The Bride of Frankenstein, so don't go into this movie expecting that in any way, because you'll be sorely disappointed and you'll just have a completely wrong expectation of what this movie is trying to do. And I always think you should be trying to take movies in their own terms and what they're trying to be, rather than what you hope for them or what you want them to be. I just think that's a much smarter and more interesting way of doing criticism than going in expecting every movie to set a specific preset criteria or standard. So with that being laid out, let's get into my thoughts on the film. Let's review The Bride. I am a huge fan of the original novel by Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. It's one of my favorite novels of all time, and depending on the day you ask me, I might say it is my favorite novel of all time. And it's always been one that's been adapted throughout the history of cinema from so many different directors, from so many different countries, with so many different, radically different ideas on how to approach the same source material. This long history of cinematic adaptation of this original text spans over 110 years. You have the original 1910 Edison Frankenstein adaptation, all the way through to the present day, where you have Maggie Gyllenhaal's The Bride coming out in theaters off an $80 million budget. You span from the lowest of low-budget horror movies all the way up into these sort of grand, huge-budget gothic romances. You have some of the most talented filmmakers of all time and some of the biggest nobody filmmakers of all time all working to adapt this story to the screen, and I find it endlessly fascinating to see what all these different filmmakers do to the film. It's almost like it's developed into a genre of its own, all these different filmmakers taking totally different approaches on that same source material, that same sort of core and heart, or completely radically changing that core and heart, but taking some of the same sort of similar trappings and making it something uniquely them. And I think that's what Maggie Gyllenhaal is doing. She's taking this sort of basic idea, her sort of interpretation of the Frankenstein story, or at least the story of the bride, which we really don't get developed in that original Bride of Frankenstein film. She's only on screen for a couple of minutes, and she's really not in any way given any sort of interiority. It's crazy how much of a long-standing sort of cultural power that image has had, because it really is just like a simple image. There isn't really any sort of long story like you get with Boris Karloff's character. And so I find it fascinating that there has been so much obsession and fascination with The Bride, but I love all these different interpretations, and I think this one is a really interesting story that Maggie Gyllenhaal took with it. The story starts with Mary Shelley being played by Jessie Buckley, and she sort of had this stronger vision for the original Frankenstein. She had more to say, but maybe due to the social pressures of the time, she was really restricted in what she could say, at least according to this interpretation, this adaptation. And so Mary Shelley goes and she possesses a woman named Ida from 1930s Chicago, who is going to soon die as a result of sort of speaking bad about the mafia boss. Not just sort of speaking bad about him, but speaking for the dead and speaking against the sort of atrocities against women that the mafia boss is having ordered, these murders that are being executed in order to keep some of their other crimes silent. So Buckley's Ida is now in a long line of these murders that are happening. She is ambiguously pushed or she falls down the stairs. Either way, they think she's dead and she gets buried, and there we go. The story is supposed to end, right? But then we get Frankenstein. This is Christian Bale's interpretation of the character, and I think he does a really good job here. He really makes you feel the sort of desperation that he has as a result of his loneliness. This isn't just standard human loneliness, but a desperate sense of loneliness as a result of being completely detached from the rest of humanity, as a result of being what they see as a monster. And so you really get an interesting performance. It's a little bit more understated compared to Buckley's more hysterical approach, which I love both of them, and I think they really counterbalance each other very well. And of course, Buckley is really the one that's carrying the movie, but Christian Bale does a good job of bringing a sense of sort of humanity and depth and good characterization to Frankenstein in a way that really sells his character as having been lonely for all these years, and then he develops this sort of obsession with the actor Ronnie Reed and with cinema as a vehicle through which he can sort of have all these dream realizations and this sort of hope for the future, and that's what's kind of been keeping him alive, is his sort of interactions with Ronnie Reed and this sort of parasocial relationship that he's having with Ronnie Reed. But now, at the beginning of this film, he's finally found Dr. Euphronius, someone that can help create a companion for him, and the two of them go and dig up Ida, and they bring her back to life. She doesn't have her memories, and she's still possessed by Mary Shelley, so she's really struggling to sort of grasp for her humanity, for what is left of her, what she has strong, like her voice. But she finds it pretty quickly, and I think even in that beginning sort of stages of the movie, she is already a voice for rejection of the status quo, rejection of what she's being told, a desire for revolt, and I think that's really interesting how that's being played, and I think Buckley does an amazing job with the sort of dual role that she's having to do. It's a really fascinating line she has to walk, but she's able to do a very good job of just having a sort of crazy, insane performance that's so just over the top and fun, but at the same time making us care about this character and making her an actually very interesting and deep character. And I really do think that her performance carries the movie, and her interactions and chemistry with Christian Bale is really something that is fascinating to watch develop, and I absolutely love the two of them in this movie, and I think the rest of the cast does a good enough job. I think Jake Gyllenhaal does a good job sort of bringing to life this idea of like a 1930s comedic musical type actor. You have Annette Bening, who does a really fun job with Dr. Euphronius. You have Peter Sarsgaard, who plays a kind of pathetic character that I really don't like watching that much. I understand a little bit what Gyllenhaal is trying to do with his character, but I just did not enjoy watching his screen time much at all, or his interactions with Buckley. I kind of thought he was like a wasted character. Now, I do like Penelope Cruz, and her character really has a sort of sadness to her that I love, and I think really brought a great depth to the movie as well. And I think I would have rather just honestly watched more of her than Skarsgård, but I kind of understand what Gyllenhaal was trying to do. Skarsgård was kind of representing men that have sort of sympathy with the sort of women victims, but won't really actually do anything to stand up against those that are victimizing them. And so I find that kind of a fascinating characterization. He's kind of a pathetic, weak man that ends up having to just give up his job to somebody who's a more competent woman. And I just think, though, that it really didn't land that well as a characterization. Like, I mean, he was a pathetic kind of loser type dude that maybe you have some sympathy for. I honestly didn't really have much sympathy for him. And I just found him to kind of be a kind of boring, uninteresting character whose only real value was he was in scenes with Penelope Cruz, who I thought was a much better developed character and more interesting in every way. Now, the story itself is very sort of fractured and has a lot of pacing issues, and the movie is just way too damn long. I don't understand why every filmmaker these days feels like their movie needs to be over 2 hours long, but this one really could have been edited down, I think, and that would have only strengthened it. As it is, though, I really did enjoy this movie because it has such a strong energy to it. It has such a sort of, it's like a primal sort of scream. It's like a psychic blast of creativity, originality, uniqueness. I mean, of course, it's referencing a lot of other movies, but of course you have to do that to build something new, to speak to the genre. And it's a movie about movies, but it's also a movie about love, about monstrousness. It's a movie about revolution and about sort of the dead speaking to the living and saying, we will not be silenced, we will not be forgotten. And I absolutely love a lot of the energy and a lot of the sort of just directness and bluntness and differenceness and just uniqueness and weirdness, and the fact that it's a film that really is trying something different and is not trying to just be a mass market sort of film. It's not going to be something that's going to have this huge amount of love always. There's going to be huge lovers of the film, huge defenders of it, and people that absolutely hate it. And you're already starting to see that this is a film with a very polarized reception, a very widespread of reaction from critics and audiences alike. This is exactly the type of movie that I love seeing being given $80 million and being given a wide distribution by a studio like Warner Bros. And I'm saddened when I watch movies like this in the theaters because I know, like when I went to see this movie, no one else was in the theater with me. And I know it's not going to do well at the box office. The marketing campaign, I could just tell it wasn't really going to necessarily resonate with a mass audience. That was not the point of this movie. It was meant to sort of be divisive. And I think that that is something that great cinema can really achieve. And I think that that is sometimes missing from these bigger studio films, these sort of films with pretty decent sized budgets. I mean, this is like a mid budget to larger budget type movie, especially for nowadays. And it's willing to be like, no, we're going to have a vision. We're going to have a point of view. We're going to be willing to sort of have haters and critics. And it's not because we're not being bold enough. It's because we are being bold and we are having an original vision. And I think Maggie Gyllenhaal has a great original voice that she's really speaking with in this film, and she's willing to take on that criticism. And I love that a film like this is being released in 2026. That's just so great for cinema and for film in general. And yeah, it's not gonna do well. It's gonna be a divisive film. It's gonna be a film that a lot of people aren't gonna talk about at the end of the year award shows or anything like that. But it's the type of movie that I love going to see because if I love it or hate it, at least it's doing something, it's trying something. I'm going to have a reaction to it. Cinema should inspire reactions, strong reactions. If you're just sort of constantly feeling lukewarm about something, it's not really doing that interesting of a job or really doing what cinema is supposed to do, what art's supposed to do. And so that's what I really have to give it to Bride. I think it is true art. The Bride is art. And I think that that is really high praise they can give for a film, despite some of its flaws that it definitely has. I loved the sort of references it had to 1930s cinema, which is something I've been getting more into lately. I love the sort of Bonnie and Clyde aspects to it. I love all the weird Mary Shelley stuff that doesn't really make sense, the possession stuff. I love all that. Jesse Buckley's just insane performance I thought was a lot of fun. The violence is really over the top and gruesome with some great effects work. There's so much to love about this movie, and there's so much to critique about it. It's overly long. It's just ridiculous sometimes with the way the storytelling is done. There's wasted characters. There's just a lot of excess that sometimes doesn't always land or cohere into anything like whole or actually becoming something better than the sum of its parts. But I think there is so much energy, and it's just such a sort of strong film that I can't help but love a lot of the stuff that's going into this movie. And I think the performances really help. I think Buckley's performance is so much fun, and I think that there's just so much strong elements here that sort of are able to overcome some of the sort of obvious flaws. And looking at something like this now in the context of Warner Bros. Acquisition by Paramount, it really does feel like this is sort of the end of an era for this studio, and what a great ending it was. What a great bang to go out on. Just a really triumphant attempt at true cinema. I absolutely love that and adore it. And I hope this isn't just the last of these types of movies that gets a wide release theatrically. But regardless of whatever happens in the sort of industry of film going forward, at least we know we have great visionary creatives like Maggie Gyllenhaal that are willing to throw it all at the wall to see what works and what doesn't, and to really try and actually approach this as an art form. And I really appreciate her for doing that, and I really appreciate this movie for being that in this modern cinematic landscape. Thank you all for watching to the end of the video. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications every time I drop a new video. So again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.